All right, looks like we are live. Welcome everybody to Standing for Truth. I am your host, Donnie, and tonight we've got an epic debate between Luca Medugno and Otangelo Grasso on intelligent design. Is there evidence for intelligent design? Now, before I introduce the debaters for tonight, I just wanted to remind anybody who may not yet be subscribed, if you enjoy debates, interviews, discussions, and more, then please hit that subscribe button and share around this content, as the truth and critical thinking is important. If you appreciate what we are doing here on Standing for Truth, then please consider supporting us and keeping us working full time. You can support us through our official website, standingfortruthministries.com, or through Patreon. Thank you, everybody. Also, a couple reminders. We've had some big events, big debates this week, including this debate on intelligent design. The fun continues next week, starting on Monday. We've got the much anticipated debate between Matt Slick and Joshua Gibbs. They will be debating the atonement. Specifically, is limited atonement biblical? Then later on that week, on the Thursday, we've got the much anticipated round 2 debate between Jackson Rowe and Dr. Kent Hovind, Genesis, Flood, and Noah's Ark, fact or fiction. So lots of fun, guys. Make sure you are subscribed so you can get the notification for these epic debates. So that being said, you guys didn't come here to see me. You came here to see the debaters, Luca and Otangelo. Luca and Otangelo, thank you so much for being here for tonight's important debate.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you for having me tonight for this channel, for this debate.
My pleasure, guys. You've both been here before. And, you've had lots of kind of interaction on this specific topic. So this is definitely going to be one to remember. Mitchell says there's two Otangelos. Yes. Luca's a tough debater. He's a tough opponent. So we thought we would, we're going to make this a 2-on-1. So we've cloned Otangelo. We're in 2021. Science has advanced. So we've got two Otangelos taking on one Luca. Maybe next time, depending on how this goes, we'll have two Lucas versus two Otangelos. So no, what we're really doing is we've got Otangelo is going to be sharing slides through his laptop. Okay, so we've got one Otangelo for that, and then his other one, his main one, is going to be used for Mike. So let's get some introductions, kind of break the ice, get to know the debaters a little bit before we get into the opening statements. Why don't we start with you, Luca? Luca, how you been? What's going on? A little bit about yourself.
Well, you all know me. My name is Luca Medugno, and I'm a chemist. I do have a degree in chemistry. I'm working as a teacher right now, but my situation is improving, so there will be some news. So life is doing great, and I'm very excited for this debate, and I hope that will be fun. So let's start.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Luca. Thanks again for being here. Otangelo, how you been? A little bit about you, a little bit about your channel, what's going on over at your channel, what you've been up to, and how you been.
Yes, thanks, Tony. Thanks, Luca. Well, I think most know me already. I am intelligent design proponent. I have two channels on YouTube. One is Intelligent Design Academy. The second one is The Go Talk. And I have a virtual library on the web, reasoneandscience.catsport.com. Maybe Donnie can later put the link here in the video so people can access the three sources. And yes, I frequently have debates on the internet about these topics: intelligent design, origins, creationism, Christian faith, philosophy, all this kind of stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that introduction, Otangelo. Thank you as well, Luca. What I'm going to do is go through the format for tonight before we get into the opening statement. So we're going to have a semi-formal debate. We're going to have roughly 12-minute opening statements. Then we're going to have an 8-minute uninterrupted rebuttal. Then we're going to have a free-flowing dialogue for about 30 to 40 minutes. Where the debaters are asking each other questions pertaining to the topic. And then we're going to have 5-minute closing statements. And then this is where we get you guys in the audience involved. We're going to have about a 30-minute audience Q&A. So make sure you're tagging me with your questions at Standing for Truth. So why don't we hand it over to Otangelo, as the title for the debate is there evidence for intelligent design? Otangelo being in the affirmative, we'll have him start us off with a 12-minute opening statement. Otangelo, if you need to share screen, let me know and I can get your slides up.
Yes, my introduction is 15 minutes and I grant the same time to Luca. Okay?
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay, so let me know when I can start.
Yes, it's up. Looks good.
Okay. So is there evidence for intelligent design? Either the origin of the natural world is evidence of an incredibly intelligent designer or an even more incredible causal mechanism, omnipotent random chance. You can certainly distinguish intuitively which part was carved by artists on Mount Rushmore and which part is the structure of the mountain formed by natural means. We know how to make the distinction between things that are the product of intelligent action made for specific purposes and which are not. That gives us the tools to investigate if we see imprints of past intelligent design in the natural world. Fine-tuning means to make precise adjustments and instantiating a setup that is precise and functional for a specific purpose. Sam Carroll called the fine-tuning of the universe one of the best arguments for intelligent design. The beginning, expansion, and stretching out of the universe was the most precisely adjusted and tuned event in all of history. If it had different values, the universe would have either quickly collapsed back on itself or expanded too rapidly for stars, planets, and life to form. Summing up all parameters, the odds to have the right expansion rate is in the order of 1 to 10 to 400 power. These odds are hard to imagine. It is like tossing all atoms in the universe like a coin and having it come up all heads in a row. Now do it in other trillion, billion universes again, and all coins would come up heads again. In my opinion, that stretches the credibility that this could ever happen by chance. In order to have life, we need stable atoms. To make them is by no means a trivial task. Atoms and life depend on precisely fine-tuned fundamental forces, the right particle masses, and the exact combination of constraints. Atomic particles in the universe are constantly jiggling and moving. If we would increase the mass of the electrons, then this quantum jiggling would become a significant problem for the stability of solid structures. We wouldn't have solid matter and no life. Let's go to the origin of life. In informatics, we make a distinction between hardware and software. The hard disk is the hardware, and there is the software, like Windows, which is an information program which runs the hardware. Software includes movies, music, books, AutoCAD, drawings, and any file that can be stored on a hard disk. An important distinction between hardware and software is that the hardware is physical while software non-physical. Information is a disembodied abstract entity independent of its physical carrier. Analogously, DNA, chromosomes, and genes are the hardware of life. And the DNA sequence is the software or information which is stored in DNA. It codes for a specific outcome, for example, how to make you. We can also compare DNA to a library full of books with information to extract blueprints that contain the instructions to build molecular machines, production assembly lines, energy turbines, and factory complexes. So origin of life researchers face two main questions. How did the basic building blocks of life emerge? Amongst them in special RNA and DNA, and the origin of genetic information. These are two distinct problems. Even after 70 years, the origin of the RNA and DNA molecule is an unsolved problem. I made a video about all the problems involved, which you can look up at my YouTube channel, Intelligent Design Academy. Kern Smith, a well-known organic chemist, wrote, "The odds against a successful unguided synthesis of a batch of primed nucleotides on the primitive Earth would be a huge number, represented approximately by 1 followed by 109 zeros. The odds are enormous against its being coincidence. No figures could express them." A remarkable confession from a non-theist. Now let's suppose there would be a ready available pool of RNAs and DNAs prebiotically. The problem is that monomers and polymers would undergo a variety of decomposition reactions in the prebiotic environment. The breakup of DNAs is spontaneous and occurs continuously in all genomes. In 2014, Jack Szostak claimed that he expected to make life in the lab in 3 to 5 years. Since then, we have not heard from him. In 2020, an article in Nature had to admit that there's a fundamental problem. Life's cornerstone molecules break down in water. This is because nucleic acids such as DNA and RNA, the chains are placed in water, it attacks the links and eventually breaks them. Paley's watchmaker argument starts with, if you see a watch in the sand of a beach, you know someone made the watch. And the several parts are made and put together for a purpose. But before the parts of the watch can be put together by the watchmaker, a watch designer has to conceptualize the watch, the individual parts, how they have to be sized to fit together, what materials to be used, and in the end, able to work in a joint venture to convey a functional outcome. So what we have here is a blueprint, or in other words, instructional assembly information to make the watch. That is analogous to what we see occurring in biology. Cells have a codified description of themselves in digital form stored in genes and have the machinery to transform that blueprint through information transfer into identical representation in analog 3D form, the physical reality of that description. John Herschel wrote, if the analogy of two phenomena be very close and striking, while at the same time the cause of one is very obvious, it becomes scarcely possible to refuse to admit the action of an analogous cause in the other, tough, not so obvious in itself. So in my view, intelligent action is the best mechanism to instantiate what we see in the cell. A classical answer to Paley's watchmaker argument has been to claim that the appearance of design was refuted by the advent of a workable theory of evolutionary change. Some say that the information stored in DNA is the product of evolution. What, however, is ignored or rarely considered is the fact that the first self-replicating cell already required to have a minimal amount of information stored in a minimal set of genes to make a minimal set of proteins. No life form without DNA is known. That turns the origin of genetic information not into a problem for evolution, but the origin of life. Paul Davies said, you don't get an evolutionary process until you got a self-replicating molecule. Darwin gave us a theory of evolution about how life has evolved, but how you go from non-life to life, that's a much bigger step. So we can invoke only an intelligent designer or unguided random events. So what are the odds for a minimal genome of a universal common ancestor to emerge by unguided natural means? To answer that question, we would need to have an idea about the size of the genome of the smallest possible self-replicating cell. Mycoplasma is often mentioned. It has about 500,000 nucleotides. It is, however, a pathogen that only lives and survives within a host organism. It locks the metabolic pathways to make amino acids the building blocks of proteins. Better is Pelagibacter rubique. It is known to be one of the smallest self-replicating bacteria. It can make all 20 amino acids used in life. Its genome size is about 1.3 million base pairs and codes for about 1,350 proteins with an average size of about 300 amino acids. What is the probability that the nucleotides of this bacteria would arrange into a functional sequence by unguided means? It would be about 10 to the 700,000th power. We cannot imagine the size of this number. If we would shuffle with the fastest possible rate that one atom can change its state per second, it would take trillion billion years to find the right nucleotide sequence of Pelagibacter. Of course, you can say that as long as chance is not zero, there is a possibility. Okay, but even to start shuffling, you would need to have a batch of primed DNAs. That would require a prebiotic mechanism to make them and select the parts from a pool of impure molecules on prebiotic Earth. How do you select without knowing what to select? Did prebiotic molecules have the intent to become parts of living cells? Another problem, and what in such probability calculations is also ignored, is the fact that biological information is also pregnant with meaning. Assigning meaning of characters through a code system where symbols of one language are assigned to symbols of another language that mean the same requires a common agreement of what the signs and words mean. We have the same challenge in the cell where through the genetic code, 64 codons are assigned to 20 amino acids in translation. Assignment of meaning requires a pre-established convention of meaning. We know only of minds capable of doing this. So let's move on. Let's suppose that I give you a fully formed genome of Pelagibacter rubique containing all the information to make the bacteria. The genome alone is functionless. The information has to be transcribed and translated to make proteins. I have never seen any proponent of natural mechanisms providing a compelling narrative to go from a supposedly self-replicating RNA molecule to a fully developed transcription and translation system. Why? In order to have a self-replicating cell, we have a chicken and egg problem. We need DNA and the information stored in DNA to create the machinery to transcribe and translate genetic information. But we need the same machinery to synthesize DNA. This is a long-known problem. Already in 1965, Sidney Fox wrote in Nature, "The riddle seems to be how, when no life existed, did substances come into being which today are absolutely essential to living systems, yet which can only be formed by those systems?" And chemist Wilhelm Huck wrote, "A working cell is more than the sum of its parts. A functioning cell must be entirely correct at once in all its complexity." Irreducible complex systems cannot emerge randomly, and not even through evolution. It is undoubtedly evidence of intelligent design. Last not least about evolution and the origin of biodiversity. The big umbrella contributor to explain organismal or phenotypic complexity, anatomical novelty, and biodiversity which falsifies and replaces unguided evolutionary mechanisms is pre-programmed, prescribed, instructional, complex, specified assembly information, encoded through at least 33 variations of genetic codes and 45 epigenetic codes, which again leads us to an intelligent designer. And Ulrich Becker, particle physicist at MIT, asks, "How can I exist without a creator? I am not aware of any answer ever given."
Just on time, Otangelo. I appreciate that opening statement. Let me just restart the clock. And I'm guessing at this point, Otangelo, you want me to get rid of one of your
yes,
icons here. This one with the mute. Okay, there we go. And I see questions already coming in. Yes, guys, we are going to have an audience Q&A. So please make sure you're tagging me with your questions at Standing for Truth. We're going to hand it over to Luca. Luca, you now have up to 15 minutes. Of course, whatever you don't use, we'll throw into the discussion portion. If you need me to share your screen, let me know, and I can do so. And as Luca gets that ready, it looks like, oh, I see it. Yeah, let me get it for you. Looks like logical, plausible, probable. He's got an epic after show, kicks off 5 minutes after this debate ends. Open mic discussion. So, guys, definitely check that out after this epic debate. So here we go, Luca. I got your slides up on screen.
Good.
And whenever you're ready, I'll start the timer on your first word.
Okay, let's go. So there is evidence for intelligent design. Let's see. Okay, this is just definition, and I bet that you all know these guys. So we can go further. Okay, crystals. Why I want to talk about crystals? Well, a crystal is a body that is formed by solidification of a chemical element or compound or a mixture. Okay, and has regularly repeating internal arrangement of its atoms and often external plate phases. Why it's important? Okay, here you can see a structure of a salt crystal, and it's geometrical. These atoms have some distances, and they do arrange themselves in a certain way. We can say that they do create some kind of information when they form a crystal. Of course, you can see the distance between the atoms. Of course, you can see the Na and Cl, so sodium chloride atoms. And a designer is needed for any of this? No. And I can show to you. So that's my kitchens, sorry. And here I can give you a little bit of structure. So you can do it at your house. So how you can make a crystal of salt? Just put some water and solve a lot of salt in it. It's very important to stir a lot when you heated the water. Heated water can solve more salt, and it's important. And then you just need to put the water in a container with. I put a little crystal in it to get a bigger crystal. You can get crystal without a starting crystal, of course. So I do recommend to use water, distilled water, but I did not for this experiment. What's the result of it? You can see it, a larger crystal, and it basically made itself, and it's no intelligent design is needed for this. The information for the formation of the crystal is already inside the crystal itself, let's say that. So information can be present in nature without a creator. So that's my little experiment here. You can do it at home if you want. So let's see something that was designed, the Ferrari. That's the first Ferrari ever made, and was made in 1947 in Modena, Italy. I don't know if you know that city. So how can we tell that was designed? The Ferrari was designed by someone, and we know who he was. This man was the designer. He did design the engine of the car, of course, but he was the most important person on it. And we know who he was. We know where he died and when. And we can find his resting place in Lambrate is even close to me. So even if we don't know the designer, we still can observe the process to make a car. Of course, this is not a Ferrari. It's still an Italian car, but not a Ferrari. But we can still observe this kind of processes to this very day. I saw during my research some older cars and some older way to produce that, and I can say that it was similar. Of course, the Ferrari was a little bit different, was a prototype, but we can still observe how we made a car. And even if we don't find the exact designer, we can still find humans, factory workers, and so we do know who designed the car. So I have some questions for Otangelo. Okay, if a designer does exist, where is now? We can interact with him, of course. We can observe a process like the creation. If not, how we can infer that reality is, in fact, a creation? Also, if complexity and information can form in nature without a designer, why we need to infer one to begin with? So those are my questions. I will very love to have an answer with that. So at the end of my presentation, I want to show some example of design in nature, bad design, if you ask me. The recurrent laryngeal nerve is one of them. It's very, very long, much, much longer than needed, and is, to my humble opinion, a good evidence for evolution. But it's also an example of bad design. If you look at it, it's way, way longer than needed. So I would love to know why this bad example of design, if a designer is real. The second example is this amoeba, and this amoeba has a very large number of chromosomes. You can see how much chromosome it has, and its genome is very, very big, much bigger than ours, and it's a single cell organism. And I would love to know why we are much more complex than this organism, why we need a much smaller chromosome, a much smaller genome. I'm curious about it. Last but not least, the Emu Bird. It's a curious example. You can see where the arrow is, a tiny arm with a claw at the end of it, and it does not have much sense because it's a claw. It's not a tiny wing, so it's completely useless. And I would love to ask Otangelo about it also. So I did end my presentation. I thanks everyone watching and hope to hear some answer. And I think this debate will be tough. I think that Otangelo made the good presentation, so I can hand here.
All right, I appreciate that opening statement there. Luca, we've got a few minutes there that we can throw into the discussion portion as well. Luca and Otangelo, that concludes your 15-minute opening statements. I appreciate the visuals. Clear and concise. Great job to the both of you. So that being said, again, to the audience, please make sure you're tagging me at Standing for Truth with your questions so we can have an awesome audience Q&A. Also, again, there will be an after show on Logical, Plausible, Probable's channel right after this debate. So it's an open mic. Anybody is welcome. So Otangelo, we're going to hand it over to you. You are on mute, my good man. So just make sure you unmute yourself before you start speaking. We're going to give you 8 minutes of uninterrupted rebuttal. And I'll start the timer on your first word.
Yes, thank you, Don. Okay, so where is God? Well, God transcends the physical realm. I don't think there is the natural and the supernatural. I think there is just reality, and some of it is accessible and detectable through our senses, and some is not. The fact that we are limited through our senses to detect reality doesn't by default mean that therefore there is just the things that we can detect. So how can we infer design? Well, I gave some examples in my introduction, and I have basically 10 main examples which I've listed in my introduction, and I can read them here. Give me just a minute, please. So first, implementing things based on regular behavior, order, mathematical rules, laws, principle, and physical constants. 2, something purposefully and intentionally developed and made to accomplish a specific goal, like building blocks, energy, and information. 3, repeating a variety of complex actions with precision based on methods that obey instructions governed by laws. 4, the making of irreducibly complex, integrated, and interdependent systems or artifacts composed of several interlocked, well-matched parts. 5, artifacts which might be employed in different systems, like a wheel is used in cars and airplanes. We see that also in nature. 6, things that are precisely adjusted and finely tuned to perform specific functions and purposes. 7, arrangement of materials and elements into details, colors, forms to produce an object of work of art, able to transmit the sense of beauty. 8, establishing a language, code, communication, and information transmission systems. 9, instructional information, which is used to construct, create, build, and operate things for specific purposes. 10, designed objects exhibit constrained optimization. That is the best balance and compromise of multiple competing factors. And if Luca would like, I can afterwards give examples of each of these 10 things which I mentioned, which we can actually observe in nature. I wrote down each point which Luca mentioned, but I lost the screen, so I will have just to answer from my head, okay? So in regards of bad or suboptimal design, even suboptimal designs require a designer. Like the new common steam engine was not nearly as efficient and practical as Watt's steam engine, but no one is in his right mind would suggest that Newcomen's engine self-assembled by random chance. Second, some designs that may look suboptimal to us are actual optimal, like the panda's thumb. The panda's thumb, he uses his thumb, actually a specialized bone in the wrist, for near continuous grasping of bamboo. If it had used an opposable thumb to do so, as proponents of naturalism suggest as a superior design, it would almost certainly suffer from permanent carpal tunnel syndrome. Third, what we see now in the world as marked by the curse of sin. For all we know, people as created may have been able to synthesize every necessary vitamin, but some of those abilities may have subsequently been lost due to genetic corruption and drift. And another nice example in regards of the bad design argument is if you see a keyboard on a cell phone and it doesn't work properly, then you are not going immediately to conclude that the cell phone was not designed. So I think that the bad design argument isn't a good argument at all to refute that designer is required to explain what we see in the natural world. Now, in regards of the laryngeal nerve, I think if you Google that, there are many sites which give an adequate explanation to that. And what I don't remember what else Luca said, so I give the word to Luca.
All right, I appreciate that rebuttal there. Otangelo, another few minutes that we can throw into the discussion, which is good because we'll have lots of time where you gentlemen can ask each other questions, specific questions to the points brought up in the opening statements and rebuttal. So that being said, we're going to hand it over to Luca. Luca, you now have up to 8 minutes for your rebuttal, and I'll start the timer on your first word.
Okay, so I did enjoy the presentation from Otangelo, and I think that there are a lot of points that we can discuss in detail, and I would love to discuss about the Schrödinger equation and the orbitals of electrons. So that's my field. I know something, and I would love to ask him some questions. So my point still stands. If a designer is here, why we cannot detect him, why we cannot ask him things, why he's not interacting with us, is still a relevant question. So I will love to know. But design is still something that we need to discuss, because if a designer exists, he can use different design to improve a design like the giraffe and some other animals. So a designer is not taken aback by evolution. So we still need to understand why some design makes no sense, like the emu. It's not like it has a tiny wing. It's equipped with claw. So the emu was owns something with arms. It's a good question, I think. And for the other parts, I think that we have a lot of to discuss with the Schrödinger equation, and later with abiogenesis. It's an argument that I love in particular. And I want to ask Otangelo some specific question about the probability of these events. So I just want to hear what he has to say about it. For me, it's not that compelling, because we do not know nearly enough to know exactly what are those probabilities. For what we know, it's more than possible that our universe is the only viable result at the end of things. So for me, Otangelo arguments does not stand, but we need to discuss it in detail. I want to focus in particular about Schrödinger equation and those kind of things. So I want to leave these minutes that I have to the open discussion.
All right, I appreciate that, Luca. Great rebuttals from the both of you, Otangelo and Luca. I appreciate it. So now we're moving into the open dialogue. We're going to do our best to make this free-flowing, cordial, and as equally timed as possible. So why don't we hand it over to Otangelo, since Luca just ended with his rebuttal. Maybe there's a few points you wanted to address and a question you'd like to ask Luca. So, gentlemen, the floor is yours. I'll put the timer for about 40 minutes, and we'll kind of go from there. So, gentlemen, go ahead.
Okay, Luca, you asked again about why we cannot detect God. So I will read here, without God's hiddenness, we would not have any significant freedom. Even those that hate God would be unable to fully live according to their wishes, much like a criminal would find it intolerable living in police station. Atheists wrongly assume that God wants everyone to worship him because he is an apparent egomaniac. The hard truth is that humans don't have a choice to not worship, but only a choice on what we will worship. God being visible to the senses would make even that choice impossible. So besides God is the foundation of all truth, beauty, life, and love, it would be like standing in front of all the beauty of nature's grandeur and all the wonder of the cosmos at once. There is none who could not fall and worship at that point. So God wants free agents which freely choose to surrender to him, to receive him as Lord and Savior, and then to follow him. He doesn't want to force anyone, and if he would become detectable and visible to all of us, then it would be very difficult for those which reject him to live the way they want without him. In regards of the emu, I don't have an answer. I have not studied that. The Schrödinger equation, the same. I have not studied that. Now, in regards, you said we don't know the probabilities of things to happen. I think science has answers to that. In regards of the fine-tuning, there are many things that it is precisely known what the odds are. Like, for example, the cosmological constant is fine-tuned to 1 to 10 to the 123rd power, which is extraordinarily huge number, which demands an explanation. It has to do with the expansion rate of the universe. Why is the universe precisely finely tuned to permit a universe with atoms, which then can become life hosting? And I can quote here a syllogism: the number of possible fine-tuned parameters and constants is infinite. One, the values, constants, and parameters for a life-permitting universe must exist within a finite range for the existence of biological life to be possible. Two, these constants and fine-tuned parameters could have taken any of the infinite number of different values.
Let me just jump in real quick, Otangelo, just because we want to keep this a free-flowing discussion, and I don't want you to bring up too many points where Luca won't be able to, address them, since this is a free-flowing dialogue. Otangelo, why don't you kind of wrap up your points and thoughts, and then we'll kind of run with a couple of them and go from there. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm already finishing, just 3 and 4. The probability of it occurring by chance approaches close to zero, but is in practical terms factually zero. The best explanation is an intelligent agent that has a goal in mind, that is to create contingent beings designed our life-permitting universe. So, to Luca.
Okay. So, God question apart, I do think that if God is real, it's his choice to not interact with us. So still a good question for me, but it's not that important. So in your presentation, I did so the Schrödinger equation, right? When you showed to us the orbital of the electrons of the atom, it was the Schrödinger equation. I did see that correctly, right?
Right.
Okay. So I want to ask you a simple question. We can solve that equation, and if we can, with what we can solve with it?
Well, as I told you, I've not studied it, so
Okay.
I cannot answer in regards
Don't worry,
to that.
I'll explain it to you because it's important to do so. So that equation can be solved, yes, but only with the atom of hydrogen, the most simple atom we can imagine. One electron spinning around proton, I think. Yes. So with anything else, we cannot solve that equation. We need to simplify the formula. What does that mean? That we do know a lot about electrons and protons, but we also do not know a lot. We cannot know what an electron is doing with everything but hydrogen atom. And we have an entire chemistry behind that. So how we can find the probability of anything if we cannot even understand chemistry to that level? We do not know enough to do that that thing. We cannot find that probability with this information. So how we can get to that number? Please answer.
Well, look, as I told you, I have not studied the Schrödinger equation, but since you are touching to the topic of electrons, as you probably know, protons, they are positively charged, and electrons, they are negatively charged, and neutrons, they are neutral. And that means that atoms in the universe, they are neutral, and that permits them to be stable, so they can remain in the universe existing for billions of years. Now, if that wouldn't be the case, and let's suppose that we wouldn't have positive and negative charge, that would entail that atoms would become ions, and they would immediately annihilate in a split of a second. Now, the interesting thing is that the electron is not composed of subatomic particles. You cannot split it in two. But the proton has 3 quarks, 2 up quarks and 1 down quark. And the 2 up quarks, they have each 2/3 of charge, and the down quark has 1/3 of charge. And if you sum it up, 2/3 plus 2/3 is 4/3 minus 1/3. You have a positive charge of 1. So there is no physical explanation of why of that composition. Why do protons have that composition of these 3 quarks, which gives a sum charge of 1, which then is able to cancel out with electrons, giving a neutral atom, and then you have stable atoms. It could be different. You could have different masses. You could have a different composition of protons, having the opposite, having 2 down quarks and 1 up quark, and then you wouldn't have the same charge. You wouldn't have stable atoms, and you wouldn't have life in the universe. And there is no physical explanation of why there is that composition. And also the neutron is slightly heavier than the proton. And also, if that wouldn't be the case, then there wouldn't be stable atoms. And there are many constants which must be just right. There are 26 different parameters in particle physics, and about 10 of them are precisely fine-tuned to permit stable atoms. So my question to you, how do you explain that if we have basically an infinite number of possibilities of different masses, of different energy levels, but we have the precise energies which are required to have the right forces which permit stable atoms, and in the end, a life-permitting universe.
Okay. So my point still stands. We do not know everything about physics. And when you study the atoms and electrons and so on and so forth, you learn that you cannot know exactly what those particles are doing. Our method to measure these things have limits, and there is an absolute limit to that. So we cannot know everything. So it's impossible to find a probability with only a part of this data. So yeah, it's incredible how atoms, protons, and electrons are made. But even the charge of electrons and protons, neutrons, and so on and so forth, what they are, we do not know. We can go that far, and it's a lot. We do know a lot about the atom, electrons, and all those things. We can measure almost everything, but not everything. Everything more complex than hydrogen, we cannot know what those particles are doing. We can just measure probability to find an electron somewhere, and there is a small probability to find that electron anywhere else. So we cannot know what's the probability for our universe. We do not know what happened 14 billion years ago, and we can say the same with abiogenesis. So how do you respond to that?
Well, I think we should work, Luca, with what we actually do know and not with what we don't know. And we have never known so much about the natural world as today. And in regards of abiogenesis, we know that DNA and genomes, they do not store things like crystals, but they store instructional assembly information to make proteins and to operate the cell. And we only know of intelligence capable of instantiating such kind of information. For instance, I'm a machine designer, and I know that I, as an intelligent being, I can sit on the table, and if the boss comes to me and tells me I need that you make a machine for that purpose, then I will sit down, I will think about the problem, and eventually I will come up with a solution, put it on the drawing table, and then the drawing will have all the sizes, materials, all information which is required to actually instantiate that device is contained in that blueprint. And it can go to the factory, and then the factory workers, they can read that blueprint, they can extract that information and transform that digital information in analog 3D information and actually build the device. And this is entirely a process which is dependent on information and intelligence from the beginning to the end. And that is analogously to what we see in the cell, where we have an information storage mechanism, which is DNA and epigenetic codes. That DNA molecule stores instructional assembly information, transmits that information. It is then translated in the ribosome, And then in the end, you have functional molecular machines which can exercise their function. So that information is functional in the end. So we don't have any example whatsoever of natural unguided mechanisms which are capable to instantiate that state of affairs, but we know that intelligence is capable. So we can actually use what we have discovered and then make inferences in regards to the past and come to the best explanation of what best explains the instantiation of this state of affairs.
Okay. So, first of all, when we talk about organic chemistry, we are still talking about chemistry, right? So, I show formation of a crystal. You say that DNA is different, and I do agree to a point, but it's still chemistry. And I can also say that crystal do hold information. You can even create a code with it. You can put some molecules inside the structure, and you can get a code. In fact, scientists are trying to find a way to store information in crystals. So how can you tell that something like the DNA is impossible to get without a designer? We do not know exactly what was the pathway to organic compounds to life. So how can you know? We, of course, not. Scientists are discovering a lot of things in the last few years, and they are still discovering things. And it's incredible if you think about it. We are looking into something that happened for regular science 4 billion years ago, maybe more, and we do not know anything. We do not know the starting condition. We do not know where it happened. We think somewhere around water, but we do not know where exactly. And we have an entire planet, and for some compounds, maybe even the universe, because we can find organic compounds outside of our planet. So how can you tell that DNA is impossible to get if we do not know at the moment the exact pathway? Please.
Well, Luca, first of all, we are talking here about 4 complex compounds which constitute the basic building blocks of life. That is amino acids, phospholipids, nucleic acids, and amino acids. And these are all chiral, and they are very specific and complex. DNA is and RNA is composed of 3 parts of the base of the backbone, the ribose, and phosphate. These parts need to be joined at the right place in the backbone. There was no natural selection prebiotically to dictate where to join the parts. And then you need not just a bunch, you need millions of them. So nature doesn't have any purpose or goals to select building blocks to then be part of living cells. So this is a big problem. The second big problem is that experiments have shown that these molecules left on their own, they decompose, they become asphalts. And there are big problems to polymerize them. And you can polymerize them in many different ways. There is again a selection problem. You have molecular machines in the cell which make that very precisely, but that was not around prebiotically. So you have a huge gap there. So that is in regards of the molecules itself. Now, in regards of the information, Luca, you cannot, okay, you said a crystal has also information. The information is descriptive. You can look at the crystal and then you can describe it. But that isn't the same of what we see in the DNA. The information is in DNA is instructional. It has to be prescribed because it instructs the sequence of these DNAs. They are information which are encoded through the genetic code, and they dictate and direct the sequence of amino acids to make functional proteins. And this is a specified complex sequence which is very rare in sequence space. And if you don't have intelligence actually to instantiate the right sequence, then you are basically relying on chance, which is what I said in my introduction. And you can make the calculations. If we suppose that the DNA and RNAs were readily available, disconsidering the problem to make them prebiotically, how do you get the right sequence, which then is information bearing to have function? You have a huge sequence space, and the odds to have just one sequence of, let's say, 100 amino acids is 1 to 10 to the 130th power. So this is a huge number. And if you think about this carefully, then it becomes very, very clear that it is scarcely possible that unguided random events would be capable to instantiate an information-bearing molecule.
Okay. So I have some question and some things to say. So did you know that it's possible to select a racemic mixture to get homochirality with some methods that can happen in nature? One is liquid chromatography. I did read some good articles about it, and they are quite recent, I think, from 2020, and that's a way. Also, crystal formation can select some parts of their semic mixtures, so you can get to homochirality with something called stereoselective reactions. So nature can do this kind of things. Of course, it's not simple. It's not like we all figure out, but we are figuring it out in this very moment. And of course, I'm saying we, but I'm not a scientist. I'm just someone that is curious about the argument. So given it's possible to get to those results, why we need a designer? For me, reality is complex enough without a designer. I do not think that we need to go further and say we need a designer. Please answer.
Well, again, Luca, as I said previously, there was no natural selection on the prebiotic Earth. And the only direction that molecules have is they decompose. They do not complexify. And when we are talking about complexification, then we are talking about to go from zero to the most complex self-replicating factory in the universe. And claiming that this could be possible by unguided random means is just absurd. I don't know how you are able to believe this, especially because you are a chemist and you know what is involved in doing so. If you take just the ribosome, which also had to be fully functional when life started to do translation, the ribosome is extremely complex, and you require machines that make the subparts of the ribosome to then assemble the ribosome, and it makes error check and then repairs or eventually discards unusable subparts. So we are talking here about extreme sophistication, and that requires all already instructional information to assemble a ribosome and all the subparts. And saying that this is possible by unguided and non-intelligent means simply seems absurd to me.
Okay, but I gave you a couple of examples. Liquid chromatography, and it's relevant to the topic because we do think that abiogenesis did happen in water or some form of liquid in any case, and stereoselective reaction are quite a good topic too. For DNA and RNA, we need to remember that those nucleic acids are not the only ones. We do not know what happened, so we can just infer some things, but we do not know everything. And those compounds can multiply by themselves. They can reproduce, in fact. Of course, you need the right condition, and we can discuss about this kind of things. I'm not prepared to do so. You need quite some research to talk about this kind of subject, but we do know that can something like RNA can reproduce by itself in some condition. So yes, it will be destroyed, but if he can reproduce faster than he is destroyed, you can have something. Every reaction as a sort of equilibrium can be both ways, or in one direction or in another. Chemistry, it's not that simple. So I want to know your opinion about it, because I gave you a couple of examples.
Yeah, Luca, I mean, I think that the RNA world hypothesis, that is a myth, which many people still believe that it is possible that eventually a self-replicating RNA molecule existed prebiotically. But I can quote you here Leslie Orgel in the paper Prebiotic Chemistry and the Origin of the RNA World. He says, it is possible that all of these and many other difficulties will one day be overcome, and that the convincing prebiotic synthesis of RNA will become available. However, many researchers in the field, myself included, think that this is unlikely. So already to synthesize prebiotically RNA is something which I have made 2 videos on it, and the problems, they are just enormous. And if you study it, Luca, then I think you are able to recognize these problems. And then even if you give me a bunch of primed RNAs to start something, to polymerize them prebiotically without the machinery, that is an unbreached problem. The claim that this is possible on clay, that is not warranted. It is not true. You need purified clay from a specific company which sells that clay, and that clay was not available prebiotically to do anything. So that is a myth. It is not true that there has been a proof that RNA can self-replicate. So no, you have no case. I'm sorry.
Okay. I think we are close to the closing, but still, how do you think that a reaction in a lab work? What do you think that a chemist do?
Let me just jump in real quick, Otangelo, before you answer that. We still got 11 minutes on the clock, so
Okay.
Take your time, guys. You still got time for a couple questions each, at least. Go ahead.
Well, Luca, I am a layman. I'm not a chemist. I have never worked in a laboratory to give you the answer to your question, so I don't know.
Okay.
What I know, however, is that always there is intelligence involved in doing these laboratory tests. Of course, on the prebiotic earth, there were no chemists around to do any tests. So you cannot, I don't think that these tests in the lab have much significance whatsoever. But if they have what they have shown, and I think that in special James Tour has made a great series of videos about this, it shows that the problem is much harder than it is popularized by some proponents of naturalism. It is a very big problem.
Okay, so I did my thesis about polymer, was a thermoelectric polymer, so a compound able to convert heat into electricity, so a very special kind of compound. It was a polymer. I was working with vials like that. This is my crystal. I did bring it to show to the people here. So yeah, I was just mixing three three chemical compounds together and wait, and the polymer will just assemble by itself, basically. Yes, chemistry, it's not that simple, of course. I was starting with the monomer, so it was not from scratch, of course. But chemistry, it's not what people think. Yes, intelligence is involved. Chemistry, it's a tough thing to do. You need to set the condition in a very smart way to get to the end result. But in the end, you can just control the environment, what you put in a beaker or things like that, the heat, temperature, pressure, you can just control that. And there are very smart ways to work with that. But in the end, to get to some result, you just need the right conditions. And we have an entire planet over millions and millions of years. And we do not know what was the condition back then, but there is a lot to think about. And I do not think that you can say it's impossible to get from there to there. It's not that easy. We are coming here after billions of years, looking at something that happened a very, very long time ago without any trace. It's not like we can look at some fossils on this topic. So very, very smart people are working with scratch, basically. And we still are getting results. Not so much, but it's incredible that we have any. So I do not agree with you in this like this.
Yeah, look, I would like to quote here from Steve Benner. He wrote in the paper Paradoxes in the Origin of Life from 2014. Discussed here is an alternative approach to guide research into the origins of life. one that focuses on paradoxes, pairs of statements, both grounded in theory and observation, that taken together suggest that the origins problem cannot be solved. So he isn't so positive about the situation of abiogenesis research. And there is another quote from him where he says that basically science papers, they claim that there is some kind of success, and they have always made that claim in the last 60 years. But when you go and actually look, what they claim to be success isn't a success whatsoever, because the problem of abiogenesis remains unsolved. And Eugene Koonin brings that also to the point when he says in The Logic of Chance, despite many interesting results to its credit, when judged by the straightforward criterion of reaching or even approaching the ultimate goal, the origin of life field is a failure. We still do not even have a plausible, coherent model, let alone a validated scenario for the emergence of life on Earth. So these are quite pessimistic words. And even Jack Szostak said, it is virtually impossible to imagine how a cell's machines, which are mostly protein-based catalysts called enzymes, could have formed spontaneously as life first arose from non-living matter around 3.7 billion years ago. So you can, of course, always express hope, but where is the threshold where you actually need to say, okay, we have searched enough, we have only come to negative results, it's time to look somewhere else.
Okay, but how can you call that negative result if you discover a new autocatalytic reaction or a way to get to homochirality just through liquid chromatography? These are new things. The last thing that I said was discovered basically last year. In science, 5 years, 6 years are a lot of time. For what I can remember, when I was studying at my university for my bachelor degree, it was discovered the third form, allotropic form of the carbon. So it's a huge thing. We are getting results. Of course, the allotropic form, it has nothing to do with abiogenesis, of course, but scientists are publishing new papers as we speak, basically. So how can you say that we are not getting results, even if we cannot prove abiogenesis, even if we cannot say that we have a pathway to life right now? We are still getting results. We are trying to discover how far we can go with a cell if we remove material from it. We do know how to assemble something that resembles a cell using, of course, material already present, of course. But those are results. If we say, okay, God did it, and we no longer research, what we can find? We are finding things. You cannot say we are failing, even if we do not find what you think. It's still result, and it's how science works.
Yeah, Luca, just as an end note, I think that what science is discovering is not going into the direction that you are actually saying. When in 1860 Haeckel described the cell, they thought that it was just a blob of protoplasm. And in the last 150 years, the more that science has advanced, the more it has discovered how complex actually life and cells are. And of course, the more complex, the more difficult it is to solve the riddle of the origin of life. And fixing carbon is a big problem, and fixing nitrogen is a big problem. And you know that there are very complex mechanisms in the cell which fix carbon, like the Wood-Ljungdahl cycle or the reverse TCA cycle. And they are composed of 9, 10 proteins with cofactors, with metal cofactors, with molybdenum cofactors. They're very complex proteins. How do you go from just clay or something like that, or metals on a prebiotic earth, doing the reaction, to the transition to have our TCA cycle? That's a huge step. You need to have all these enzymes. How do you make them? How do you join them together, work like in a production line fashioned manner to produce a specific product? These are huge problems. And the same goes with nitrogen. And they have been so desperate to find a prebiotic origin of fixed nitrogen that in the last 2016 paper in Nature about the last universal common ancestor, they included nitrogenase enzymes. And you know how complex that the process is to fix nitrogen. So these are huge problems. And just saying, well, we are keep trying, it's simply not going to work if the problem, rather than closing the gap, is going to get bigger and bigger, and you go nowhere.
Well, if you start to discover things, no matter how complex the problem is, you will get to some result later, sooner or later. So I do not agree with you, with that. Even if we cannot find a pathway, and I think we will, because let's face it, a pathway is almost certain to be there. I do not know how simple or hard it is to get from a point to another point, but with chemistry, almost anything is possible. Carbon chemistry, organic chemistry in particular, is very complex, and almost I cannot say that everything is possible because there are rules, but I do not see as impossible abiogenesis. Of course, we do not know how it happened, but it's a far cry to say that's impossible. Of course, if someone is believing in a creator, probability does not matter, because if a creator does exist, it can intervene in the process. I do not believe in it, so I think we will eventually find that pathway, but we do not know yet. But what I described to you are quite important results, so I do not agree with you. Sorry. I think that the progress is there. Of course, it's not like we do know everything, because in science it's literally impossible to know everything. And I would not, I do not want to know everything, because when you know everything, your job is done, and it's awful. Please.
Gentlemen, we've got a really only about a minute left on the discussion portion. If you want to, Otangelo, I imagine there might be a few things you want to respond to there, but you do get your closing statement first. So did you want to move into closing statements? And we get 5 minutes on the clock, Otangelo, so we can give you the opportunity to kind of wrap up your thoughts, wrap up your points in the form of your concluding statement.
Yes, I hope that I have made it very clear that a big problem for naturalistic explanations is that there was no natural selection. Natural selection has traditionally been used as a crutch to support materialism and naturalism, but as soon as we are not talking anymore about biodiversity and the origin of organismal architecture, and as soon as we go away from evolution, then it becomes very clear that the problem or the true dispute is between intelligence and non-intelligence. And as soon as you remove intelligence as a causal principle and mechanism, then all which you have left is chance, which isn't even a mechanism, but just random natural reactions and actions. And this is a big problem, because what we see and what is necessary, the trajectory to go from molecules to the first self-replicating cell, is bigger than to go from the first replicating cell to man. It is a huge step. And we are talking here about the most complex factory that we know about, which is self-replicating, and we cannot make self-replicating factories. And cells, they are full of information and translation mechanisms, information transmission mechanisms. And there are problems of chicken and egg. And there are problems of explaining the origin of the information stored in the first living cell. There is a problem to explain the origin of the genetic code. There is a problem to explain homochirality. I disagree with Luca that it is a solved problem. It's not. There is a big problem to explain the origin of the biomolecules which are used in life. There is a big problem to explain how they were selected, because there was no selection process there. How to join DNA and RNAs, how to select the 20 amino acids that are used in life. These are all open questions. How do you go from a bunch of basic building blocks to the most complex factory, which is self-replicating? Big problems. And of course, you can always say, well, we are not there yet, but who knows, one day science will have an answer. Well, that is a materialism of the gaps argument. Materialists, they continuously argue with us and accuse us of using God of the gaps, but that's what they are doing. They are always saying, well, we don't know precisely, but science is advancing, but one day it will know. Well, how do you know that? You don't. The problem, rather than closing the gaps, is getting bigger and bigger. And when do you get the threshold where you have to say, well, the predictions that have been made based on evolution and naturalism have not been fulfilled. They have not been. They have not reached a conclusion. Shostak said in 2014, well, in about 3 to 5 years, we find a way to explain the origin of life. Well, no, they haven't. He hasn't come back to explain it to us. So I would say we are in a great age where it is exposed that natural mechanisms, they are impotent. They are not case adequate to explain origins in any sense. It starts with the origin of the universe, with the fine-tuning, with the origin of the laws of physics, with the origin of stars, planets, fine-tuning of the earth, origin of life, and even evolution. Biodiversity is not correctly explained through evolution.
All right, I appreciate that closing statement, Otangelo, with about a minute to spare. So we're going to hand it over to Luca. Gentlemen, fantastic discussion, very intellectual, very engaging. I really enjoyed it. And I want to remind everybody that there will be an after show over on John Maddox's channel. It is going to kick off, from my understanding, right after this debate, and I believe I still have the link pinned. So definitely check that out. So, Luca, we're going to hand it over to you, my good man, for your 5-minute concluding statement. Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Well, that was fun. So I did enjoy the debate, and I was not expecting to have a discussion to this level, and was a welcome surprise. I think that I did add quite some good points. I think that science is making progress, a lot of progress, and I would love to have another discussion with maybe some more specific topics about these things, because I did improvise a lot, and I would love to get to prepare better for it. So I think that I did well, not less. So it was fun. That's it. It was a pleasure.
I appreciate it, Luca. I appreciate it. Yes, it was a pleasure and a privilege to host the both of you, Otangelo and Luca. I really appreciate you guys giving us your time for this debate, because if you weren't so willing to give us your time, we wouldn't have these epic debates. So, blessings to the both of you. Before we head into the audience question Q&A, if there are any last-minute questions as well, guys, in the chat, tag me, and if we get a chance to get to them, I'll put them up on screen. So a couple reminders. Again, it's been a great week of events. We've had some good interviews and debates. Next week, the fun continues. For anybody who just got here, we will be taking tomorrow off, being Sunday. We're going to get some behind-the-scenes work done. I just confirmed a few more epic theology debates for 2022, so we'll get those up soon. Monday, at 8 EST, Matt Slick and Josh Gibbs, both very seasoned debaters. It's going to be an epic debate. Is limited atonement biblical? Then later on that week, Jackson Rowe, who is in the chat, good to see you. He is going to be here debating Kent Hovind. That'll be their round 2. Genesis Flood and Noah's Ark, fact or fiction. Actually, Jackson Rowe will be back a week after that as well. He'll be debating Jonathan Guzman on whether or not modern birds evolved from theropod dinosaurs. So that'll be, I believe, our first time debating that topic. And we've hosted over 130 debates. So that's going to be epic. I'm excited for that. And Luca, actually, you're going to be back here as well, my good man, right at the end of the month. Or I think actually January 1st. It's going to be a New Year's debate. So you're going to be debating Nephilim Free on Noah's Ark, the feasibility of Noah's Ark. So that's going to be fun.
I cannot wait. I do have a lot of ideas for that debate. So I hope that the audience did enjoy my presentation. I did put a lot of effort in it. I also did the crystal, and I hope that some people will also create some crystal for their children or for themselves. It's a lot of fun to do so.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Luca. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that debate as well. So, guys, just stay up to date. The web designer did just let me know that the website is all updated as well. Check the event section there for all upcoming debates, interviews, and discussions. So, Occult Nino says it was fun tonight. I agree. An hour and a half flew by, guys. So you guys really made for an engaging discussion. So that being said, let's get right into the audience Q&A. As you guys know, you've been here before. What we typically do on Standing for Truth is whoever the question is for, we're going to make sure that they get the last word. Okay, so say the question's for Luca. Luca, you get to answer the question. Otangelo will give you a minute or two to respond, add anything you'd like to add. And then we would give Luca the last word, so that way we can move along smoothly. So let's get to the first question. And Daniel Spencer, I appreciate that. He says, great debate, guys. Thanks for sharing SFT. Very important topic. And the debate is probably going to continue over on LPP's channel when this is done. So everybody, please go over there for that. First question comes in from Kevin's Biblical Discussions. He's actually a member of the channel. So I do want to thank all our members and all our patrons. There we go. So first question is for you, Luca. He says, question for Luca. How do you explain symbiotic relationships in nature without a creator?
Well, you don't need a creator for that. It's a gradual process. It's not like those creatures, they were present to the beginning in that state. It's something that happens gradually. So two different organisms that can live by themselves, they start to interact, like maybe some fish that can eat from a shark fin or so. So you will have an organism that can feed from that shark, but also from somewhere else. And with evolution, you can get to a situation where the fish can only eat from the shark or something close to that. And you don't need a creator for that or an intelligent design. Just a gradual process with two organisms that can survive by themselves, and over time you can get two organisms that need each other.
All right, I appreciate that answer there, Luca, and I appreciate the question, Kevin. We also got a new member. Conrad became a YouTube member. Welcome to the SFT membership club. So thank you so much, Conrad. Otangelo, we'll hand it over to you. You are on mute. I heard a little bit of feedback there, so I decided to mute you. Just make sure you unmute yourself. Anything you wanted to add? Any points you wanted to make to that?
No, I had only 2% of my battery, so I had to find the charger. Maybe that was the problem of having some background noise.
No worries.
I hope so I was distracted, so I have nothing to add.
No worries. I appreciate that, Otangelo. I'm glad that you got your phone on the charger in time. So it's all good. Next question comes in from C Science Film Labs. I appreciate the question, C Science. Question for you, Luca. So you are on the hot seat tonight, and I appreciate you being a good sport. So question is, aren't the interdependent natural processes that result in natural structures like snowflakes and crystals?
What does it mean? The laws of nature? Yes, of course, but you have to show that a designer is needed for that, because I just stop at reality as we see today. So for me, natural laws are just there. It's not like that someone puts those there.
All right, I appreciate it. He says it was a two-part question. I guess the second part is below it. It's right here, but it looked like you understood what he was asking, Luca, because that's pretty much what you answered to. Are those evidence for a grand designer's initial instruction? So unless there's anything you wanted to add to it.
No, it's fine. I do not think that you need a designer, because if you have a designer, you can ask the question, who is the designer of the designer, and you will get to a point where it's meaningless to ask that question. So I just stop at laws, and reality itself, it's already there. So I'll start from there.
All right. I appreciate that, Luke, and I appreciate the question, C Science. Otangelo, anything you wanted to add?
No.
All right. All right. Short and sweet. So let's see. Next question comes in from Sunflower. And he gives a super chat. I appreciate the support, Sunflower. So his question is, we have never seen abiogenesis. So this one is going to be for you as well, Luca. But we currently see humans attempting to create and modify life. Doesn't this fit the same criteria as the Ferrari? Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, we did not see abiogenesis. In fact, it's not a theory. It's a mere hypothesis. And, well, scientists are experimenting on that. But it's not like we are creating life with only intelligence. If you need to show something like abiogenesis, you need to set some experiment that are made to reproduce some environment. So it's not like you do whatever you want. But of course, there are some experiments with intelligence, with people trying to get to a cell. It's a different thing. It's interesting to do so for a lot of reasons. If you do get to a cell, and we are more or less close, we do know how cells are made. So we just need a lot of work to get there, but it's not impossible to do so. And when you do know more about the cell, so you can do better hypothesis about how it came to be.
All right, I appreciate that answer there, Luca, and I appreciate the question and the super chat, Sunflower. Otangelo, over to you. Anything you wanted to add? Anything you wanted to say?
No.
Okay. You're man, a few words. I appreciate that. He's just giving you easy points there, I guess, Luca. I'm just kidding. Feel free, Otangelo, if there's anything you want to add here, anything you object to what Luke is saying, this is your chance for sure. The debate oftentimes continues in the Q&A. So that being said, let's get to the next question. Tony Maurice, and Tony wants us to, he's coming at you, Luca, because he wants to set up a debate with you next month. So that I am happy to do. I think that would be an epic debate as well, much like this debate, Otangelo versus Luca. So Tony Maurice asks, question for Luca: who was the original inventor of the wheel? Because maybe it formed by chance. Does he think that's possible, or was it designed?
Okay, as I said in my presentation, we do know who invented the wheel. It was a human. We do not know the name of this genius, but we can infer that was indeed a human, and we can still produce that kind of wheel. So we do find those wheels. We do find the corpses of the people doing that kind of job. We do find their work, because even for ancient humans, we do find their minds, their tools. So it's not like we do not know. And also we can reproduce that kind of process. It's not like creation. We cannot reproduce something like creation. We do not know even if it's even possible to do something like that.
I appreciate that, Luca. Otangelo, I'm guessing we're going to the next question, or is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I would like actually to answer to that.
Go ahead.
No, I think it is a good question which Tony asked, and I mean I try to simplify the things to clarify how irrational the proposition of abiogenesis is. And illustration which I frequently give is when I ask, if you see a recipe on the table to make a cake, and you have two options. Someone wrote it, and the other is that it just happened to get there by natural means, of course you will answer that someone wrote the recipe to make the cake. Of course. It's obvious. You would never say, well, maybe it was the wind or something like that, which somehow put the ink on the piece of paper, and then somehow the recipe got there. That would be completely irrational. But when you ask the same question analogously to where the information in the genome came from, then Luca and others say, well, it's possible by natural means. So I don't understand how you can make that inference, which to me at least sounds completely irrational. Completely irrational. So that's my 2 cents to that.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate that, Otangelo. And also, I wanted to thank you both for making a debate that was very easy to moderate. You guys were cordial and very sophisticated in your dialogue. So you made my job easy. I appreciate that. Luca, question was for you. So we'll give you the last word. Go ahead.
So my question is, if you find something that seems designed, let's say, in the moon, you go to the moon or another planet, and you find a rock that has a particular shape. What did you do until you find more evidence? Because if you find some corpses, or even better, some creatures, you can say, okay, they did it. But if you don't, and you find just that rock, what will you do? Will you go, there are aliens like that, or you will try to find another explanation? Because that's the difference. Some things in nature seem designed, but they are not. When you do not find anyone there, what you do? You need to put up an hypothesis. So you can say maybe it was designed, but maybe not.
Cool. I think
we lost Otangelo.
I think it's me versus you now, Luca. So
Okay.
I know you're a little tired. It's been a couple hours, but the much anticipated debate between Luca and SFT starts now. So
Okay.
Just kidding. Let's well, since most questions are for you anyways, we will wait until Otangelo gets back in. He was mentioning earlier that his cell phone was running kind of low on battery, so that might have been the issue. We'll wait for him to come back and ask him his questions. There are a couple for him here. So let's go to the next one that's for you, Luca. Shelly, I appreciate the question. Shelly, question for Luca. What is your idea of God interacting with us in some way?
Okay. Well, depends on the kind of God, of course. We can define a God. I don't know. What I think when I say that, it's if God can interact with us, and if it's a God, it's possible. I think something like suggesting some words or phrases to my opponent, to say something that only I can know. I think that an omnipotent being can reduce me to tears with 4, 5, 10 words max. I do not think that you need more. So if a God exists, he does not need to do a very big miracle. He can just suggest some words to someone, and just like that, you can destroy me in 10 words.
All right, I appreciate that question and answer there, Luca. So next question comes in from Kevin's Biblical Discussions. I appreciate the question, Kevin. Question for Luca. What would it take for you to acknowledge God is the creator of all things?
Okay, I just gave an example. Just gave give me those 10 words and I will crack like an egg. It's that simple.
Okay. I appreciate it, Luca. And Otangelo, welcome back, brother.
Yeah, I was disconnected.
No worries. No worries. We waited for you, obviously, to get to your questions because there is at least one here for you. This one's from Jackson Rowe. So he says, for Otangelo, what do you think of relatively complex organics forming in Titan's atmosphere, known as tholins, chains of amino acids similar to proteins? Did I pronounce that right, Luca? You're the chemistry guy here. Tholins. Okay. THOLINS. Otangelo.
Well, I didn't hear about them, but I mean, all these proposals of panspermia or things like that, they are completely baseless and irrelevant to explain anything. First of all, there is a big problem if amino acids were extant on comets or something like that, or in the atmosphere or whatever. These are not the 20 amino acids which are used in life. And supposedly there are hundreds and hundreds of different amino acids extant prebiotically, and you need just 20. So how do you select those which life uses? That's the problem. There was no natural selection. And the second, of course, is that amino acids, they come with two hands, with one hand, they come left-handed, right-handed. They come in unpure, they come in all kinds of ways. So how do you get those which are actually used in life? There is no solution to that. There was no natural selection. So I am very skeptical in regards to all these proposals.
I appreciate that response, Otangelo, and I appreciate the question, Jackson. Luca, anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah. We do not know if those 20 amino acids were all that was, because right now we do have those 20 amino acids, but we do not know anything about ancient organisms. We can find their fossils, but we cannot know anything about them. We do not know what was back there, like their metabolic paths and so on and so forth. We do know that whatever it survived, it now has those 20 amino acids. So it's relevant to know those kind of things, because if we can get those kind of compounds elsewhere, like a titan, I was aware of that, you can get those material from the universe. So you do have a starting point, and it's better than nothing. Of course, it's not necessary to get to abiogenesis, but it's something that it's good to study. It can be to some help.
I appreciate the response. Luca, Otangelo, question was for you, my good man. If you wanted the last word, go ahead.
No, I think I already gave my answer to that.
No problem. All right, let's move on. This question comes in from Redefine Living. I appreciate the question, Redefine. So his question is for you, Luca. Question is, the critters in the Cambrian explosion have some of the most complex eyes without the time for evolution. How can you explain this?
Okay. It's a good question. The thing is, it's not like the Cambrian was the start of all things. Of course, we are talking about the scientific consensus right here. Cambrian was a period like 500 million years ago. So it's not in an whole an young Earth creation perspective, but it was not the beginning. Life was already there and it was there for quite some time, billion of years. So we do have other organisms in the fossil record in the Precambrian. So it's not like those eyes came from nothing.
I appreciate that response, Luca. Otangelo, if there's anything you wanted to add to that question about the Cambrian explosion, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the Cambrian is a big problem for proponents of evolution, and the eyes of trilobites, they are very, very sophisticated. They are amongst the most sophisticated eyes that we know about, and there are no precursors. So there is no evolutionary explanation about the origin of the eyes of them. And yeah, and I mean, 45 million years, which is supposedly the time span for the Cambrian, produced about 45 principal phyla. And that's a big problem because evolution requires much more time to generate the complexity of these body plans. So, of course, they cannot come up with made-up explanations like stasis and then suddenly a burst of evolution and things like that. But I mean, these are just made-up stories.
Go ahead, Luca.
Okay. 45 million years are quite a lot of time. So yes, it was an explosion, a lot of evolution going on in that period. But we need to remember that in some condition, evolution can be quite fast. And the Earth was, I cannot say empty, but it was there was a lot of things going on, and when you are at the beginning, it's not like you can find very good predators or things that can kill you. So evolution can be quite fast in those conditions. Of course, over that period, life got quite harsh, of course, like it always is. But I do not see a problem with 45 million years. Even some million years, there are still a lot of times. So, and we do have previous organisms, so it's not like we are starting from zero.
All right, thank you for the responses, Luca and Otangelo. So this next question comes in from Mitchell. Mitchell, I appreciate your question. So question for Luca: can a neodymium magnet create a cylindrical form from natural elements without intelligence?
I do not know. Sorry.
No worries. I think he might have clarified. Let me see something. He says the properties and the law of attraction are already there for a neodymium magnet to randomly form itself, yet it's never observed in nature. I'm not. Is there anything you wanted to add to it, Luca, or just kind of move on?
I do not know anything about it. So yes, the law of magnetism is there, but I do not even know what kind of compound are we talking about. So it depends. Magnetism can create some forms. It has a form. If you look, you can see how magnetism work with lime, iron lime. You can see how it work. You can see the form of the magnetism. How can I say? Sorry, I'm quite out of my depth here. So,
no worries, no worries. And you guys been going at it for 2 hours anyways, so great endurance from the both of you. Here's the last question anyways, and it comes in from Daniel Spencer, and it's a question for both. So we'll get you both involved on this one, and then we'll call it a night in terms of the formal debate itself, and kind of head over to the after show on John's channel. So I appreciate the question from Daniel Spencer. Question for both, he says. Do you think that you are exercising faith with your model? And if so, why have you chosen to place your faith there? He says, thank you for your time, and thank you for the question, Daniel. Go ahead, whoever wants to start.
Okay. I do not put faith in this model. I care about evidence. If you show me that a God is real, I will accept the fact. It's not like I'm on my position and I will never change my idea. For now, I'm still on this position, but no faith involved.
I appreciate that response there, Luca. Otangelo, over to you.
Yeah, I hear that constantly. Atheists claiming that they don't exercise faith. But the truth is that in order to be an atheist, you need much more faith than a theist, because to believe that unguided random chance can instantiate a universe and fine-tune it and instantiate life and all in all its forms and complexity, that is just you need a lot of faith to believe that this is possible. And so the claim that atheists do not exercise faith is just not true. And of course, I mean, our ultimate inference is always based on faith. So we start from the evidence which we see around us, and then try to make the best sense of it. And I think that evidence is overwhelming, that everything must have been created. And I think I have much less faith to infer God, to believe in God, than anyone that wants to stick to the belief that God is not necessary.
Well, thank you for that answer, Otangelo. I appreciate the final question there from Daniel. So we are at the roughly 2 hour and 10 minute mark. The debate has flown by again. Great job, Luca and Otangelo. Fantastic debate, very sophisticated and engaging dialogue. So I appreciate it. As we like to do before we officially shut things down, again, Luca, Otangelo, thank you so much for giving us your time for tonight. Some final words, final thoughts from the debaters. Why don't we start with Luca? Again, thanks for being here. Final words.
It was a pleasure. As I said, I was not expecting this level on debate, so good job, Otangelo. Ho adorato questo dibattito e mi sono divertito. Sorry if I said something in my language, but I think he can understand. I was just complimenting him, so that's all. It was a pleasure.
I appreciate that, Luca. I'll have to look up later to see what you said. Turns out it's an insult towards me. How dare you? I appreciate that, Luca. So, Otangelo, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us your time. Final thoughts, final words?
Yes, thank you, Don, for having me. It has been a long time that I had my last debate on your channel, and so it was fun. Thank you to Luca for have accepted to have that debate. So I look forward to have others at your channel, because you are always a great host, a great moderator, great channel. So I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate that, Otangelo. I appreciate those kind words. So again, thank you to the audience. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the great questions. That was a great audience Q&A. So we are heading over to Logical Plausible Probables channel. I will be joining probably a little bit later. I'm going to go kind of relax and have a quick bite to eat. I imagine the debaters will want to do that as well after 2 hours and 10 minutes. So please head on over to John's channel. And tomorrow is a day off for us in terms of live streams, but we will be back here Monday. So make sure you're here, especially if you love a good old theology debate. Two seasoned debaters. I highly respect both of these men, Matt Slick and Joshua Gibbs. Is limited atonement biblical. So we will see you then in terms of here, and we'll see you now over on John Maddox's channel. So again, Otangelo, Luca, thank you so much. And to the audience, thank you for tuning in. God bless. Standing for Truth's out.